Hello, welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you're dialing in from. My name is Caroline. I manage engineering, product design, and support operations at Plaid, and I'm really excited to be with you today for Behind the Code with Plaid Engineering. This is a speaker series put on by Plaid, and it exists to dive deeper into the people, the stories, and the technology that powers Plaid Engineering. Today, we're joined by Lou and Yaroslav, two of our engineering managers who were pivotal in Plaid's expansion to Europe. Over the next 40 minutes or so, they're going to tell us more about why we entered Europe, what the fintech landscape looks like today, and how Plaid's changing it, and share some of their key learnings for folks who are interested in maybe going on this journey with us. But before we dive into the content, I want to do some quick housekeeping. Format-wise, we're going to spend about 30 minutes in conversation and then turn it over to Q&A. With that in mind, please save your questions for the end, and we're going to ask y'all to just ask your questions live to join this conversation with us. So store those or throw them in the Q&A feature if you might forget them. Some of you have already introduced yourself in the chat to us. Feel free to submit your name and where you're dialing in from so we can see more about where everyone on this call is located. That's it for me for now. So let's dive into the content. Let's start with introductions. Yaroslav, Lou, mind telling us who you are, what you do?
Go for it, Yaroslav.
Great. Hi all, my name is Yaroslav Korshak. I'm a Ukrainian, I'm an engineering manager at Plaid. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, starting from some of the odd jobs when the internet was young. Eventually landing at booking.com, where I've spent about 6 years doing different things from email marketing infrastructure to driving search conversion as high up as possible. And really excited to kind of say that a year and a half ago I joined Plaid. Found Lou, found the team here, found really exciting. And my role at Plaid is building our Amsterdam team from ground up. It's been an exciting journey, year and a half now. Almost all done through COVID, except the 5 days before that. And right now we're in quite a great place, but we'll talk about that a bit later. In the meantime, I will hand over to Lou.
Cool, thanks Yaroslav. Hi everyone, Lou Kozak, been at Plaid a couple of years. I lead international engineering, and I also rep our US money movement stuff called Momo. I was previously at Airbnb for a bunch of years, joined there as an IC and moved into management. I was doing payment stuff, sort of building out Airbnb's internal version of Stripe, which, you know, for the kind of volume we were doing, ended up being a pretty interesting project. And I'm super excited to be at Plaid, helping expand our operations into Europe these days.
Thanks both. Lou, can you tell us more about what factors went into the decision to go abroad? Why Europe?
Yeah, yes. I mean, Plaid really wasn't looking at Europe prior to 2019. We were basically entirely US focused. And a couple of things really got us interested in the market. One was realizing how much fintech was exploding in Europe, and especially certain markets, right? So now the UK, I think, is like the #2 fintech country in the world. And the growth, similar to the US, is just stratospheric at the moment. We also realized that there was a lot of change happening in Europe that made it much easier to sort of get into the market at a ground level with some of the new technologies that were emerging around open banking, which I can talk a little bit about later. So basically, we felt like it was the right time for us, and we saw a big opportunity. We were really excited to move into the market, just like in the last year and a half or two.
And then why specifically Amsterdam as our engineering hub? I know Yaroslav is going to tell us more about everything that went into building the office and continuing to manage through such rapid growth, but why did we pick Amsterdam in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we were looking at a lot of different locations in Europe, And Amsterdam ended up having just a killer combination of features for us. It was a small, really accessible market, very friendly to immigration, really high quality of life, great tax incentives for people moving in from abroad. And it also has a great tech presence, right? It actually has a lot of banking and a surprising amount of fintech for a pretty small market, and some very top engineering talent, both native Dutch and folks from all over the world who have relocated there. So for us, wanting to be in a country that is going to stay, hopefully, in the European Union, but that also is very central and feels connected to the UK and Western Europe, it was kind of a no-brainer. And Plaid, looking at Europe, we're there for the long haul, and we will continue to grow that office and our European presence in general, not just to sell into Europe, but to power Plaid as a global business. And so we're very excited to call Amsterdam our European headquarters for engineering and product, and I'm really excited to continue to grow that office.
And how did our customers respond when we said we were going to Europe, building this office in Amsterdam? What did it mean for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of sort of finally from customers that we work with in the US who either had been looking to expand to Europe or were already there and maybe working with local companies that they weren't super happy about. So we've had very positive feedback. And from the European fintech sector, people who understand the US market and sort of know our name, really rolled out the red carpet for us. They were thrilled that we were finally paying attention to this market that they've been in since the beginning. And so yeah, it's been very positive overall.
Awesome. You mentioned open banking. You've been talking about the fintech landscape. Maybe Yaroslav, you can dive a bit deeper for us into what the fintech landscape looks like in Europe. What are some of the unique challenges and the opportunities that we've had as we've tried to grow there?
Thanks, Caroline. I find it really interesting challenge because it's very different in between the US and the landscape of fintech and that in Europe. Europe is not a uniform landscape. It's not a flat surface. There are multiple countries. There are multiple different cultures that are combined together in rather a bigger union. So it's more complicated to navigate. It's more complex to navigate different cultures, different languages, different financial habits. Say one of the examples of that is Germany is much more on the cash spend, while the other countries are much more on the cards. And so on. And it's very different from the US culture of using the credit and things like that. So that goes into the customer habits. Now, when it comes to the actual practical networking in between the banks and the fintech companies, it's also non-uniform. So different countries have their own different cultures. They have their own different clusters of the banking API implementation and things alike. So the challenge on the team is going in the way on how to move fast, how to expand really fast and deliver the best value to our customers, and at the same time, how to capture it properly without too much of engineering spend. So we don't want to go into much of a mundane engineering tasks. We want to be smart about that. We want to go and get the 80% of the value with 20% of the efforts and then capture the rest, which requires to have a really smart team, which requires to have a structural thinking, which requires to put a lot of thoughts before we act. And I think I'm really proud of the team. Right now, someone just figured out a really smart way of integrating with 400 banks in one go. And that saves a lot of efforts, that a huge impact. And we have a lot of smart examples like that. Maybe not every day, but certainly every other month. So that's a couple of words about the challenge. Thanks, Caroline.
And the fintech landscape has changed pretty rapidly since we entered about 18 months ago, right? Like a lot of that has been propelled by Plaid. And I'm going to take a moment to brag on the two panelists, really pivotal in starting Plaid in Europe. And we've already seen, 7 times growth in terms of the employees we have based out of London and Amsterdam. And it's really, I think, surpassed a lot of our expectations all around. And it's just been great to see the impact y'all are having. So thank you. And thanks for letting me brag on you for a second. Now, I wanted to go back to something that Lou had shared a bit earlier around open banking, because I know that's a pretty big topic as we're thinking about fintech and the fintech landscape in Europe. Lou, can you give us a quick overview of what open banking is?
Yes, as I can. So the thing that struck me when I joined Plaid and started learning more about what was happening in Europe is that in many ways, I think Europe is kind of ahead in terms of the regulatory environment and in terms of its desire to make customer data and customer bank information available and open to extend and sort of build new products on top of. And open banking is emerging from European regulations, emerging from a sort of trend country by country to compel banks in some cases, but really incentivize banks to open up APIs, to make it easier for third parties to work with their customers, and to create more of an ecosystem, right? As opposed to these sort of walled gardens that banks traditionally operated as. And we're seeing similar trends in the US. It's obviously evolving in a different way. But what's exciting to us is that, as I mentioned, it creates a lot of opportunity because it's really changing what's possible. And it's changing what consumers can expect from their banks and the kind of companies you can build on top of it. When a bunch of new companies are being created, that's exactly where Plaid wants to be, right? Because we think we can be best in class and sell our services to all of them and sort of rise with the ecosystem. So I think it's been neat for us to see how quickly this has been adopted country by country. And it wasn't clear at the beginning that it would be such a rapid development. And I think the growth in fintech over the last couple of years is really, as you alluded to, Caroline, a perfect example of the success of open banking in Europe in many ways.
Thanks for that overview. It also really highlights one of the unique challenges from operating globally, which is all of the different regulations and the expectations from the governing bodies. Yaroslav, can you tell us more about how you navigate all of that change and all of those new expectations?
Thank you. Yes, it is not an easy topic because as we operate in different regions and especially in post-Brexit landscape, there are multiple government bodies, there are different regulators, there are different regulations we have to follow and obey. At the same time, we also really eager to make sure that we progress on the mission to democratize financial services. We want to make sure that our customers receive the best experience and we drive a lot of impact. So we need to strike the right balance in between obeying and complying with the regulatory requirements, be secure, and at the same time move fast, iterate fast with our product, and expand in our coverage really fast. So that takes to have a skilled team, that takes to have a work cross-functionally. The engineers on our team got to work with legal, with compliance, but at the same time, Plaid as a company is not rigid, is not too heavy on the process with its current state. We move fast, everyone is very supportive, everyone is very collaborative. It's a pleasure to work with that. It doesn't go into super formal, super boring and super slow environment, which I'm really proud of having like fast moving, impactful work done together on the team.
That's awesome. You started alluding to the different products and even as we think about the different regulations, there's also product specific expectations beyond what's happening in the fintech landscape. And I know one of our big bets right now is payments. It's a big investment area for us in Europe. Lou, could you tell us more about why we're focusing on payments as a product and what's happening there?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting arc, as you allude to. When we came into Europe, we started by just taking our existing US product offerings and selling those. And we do have a lot of demand for that. But one thing that surprised us was how much of an opportunity there seems to be in Europe around payments and specifically bank payments. And this is due to the fact that two things are sort of happening at once. One, as I mentioned with open banking, all these APIs are opening up, which allow for new kinds of payment experiences involving your bank. So instead of the old way of sending money in Europe, where you would typically, get the recipients, account details and have to type that in manually and include a reference to your purchase or whatever, and then have no idea if it went through or not. You can now have an experience that's as streamlined as, you're in an app and you want to send them some money. You can be redirected to your mobile banking app, do a Face ID or a biometric authentication, confirm the transaction, and immediately be returned to the app. So in the best case, it's extremely slick. At the same time, as the Europeans on this call can attest, using credit cards online is getting increasingly annoying, and even debit cards, right? There's multiple factor challenges. You're still having to do manual data entry. So we believe that over the next few years, there's going to be a real consumer shift towards more streamlined bank payments powered by open banking. And we believe we can be a really positive contribution to that shift and provide a great consumer experience that starts to transform that market.
That's awesome. Thanks for diving into that. Looking at the time, we have about 9 minutes left for this segment before we move to Q&A. So I want to remind the crowd, if you have any questions, to save those, because we'll be getting to them soon. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what actually went into building a new engineering hub. Yaroslav, you were telling us at the beginning that it's been this great journey. We're moving really quickly, and you're responsible for that in many ways. So I'd love to hear from you, like, what actually goes in to opening a new office? Like, there's got to be a ton of stuff that we might not even think about. Can you tell us more about it?
That's very true. Opening a new office is always a unique opportunity, especially when you go cross country, especially when you go in really big distance, different time zone. Having the new office to be open for already existing established company brings the challenges in the way that one wants to keep the existing company culture. We want the office in Amsterdam to reflect on the global Plaid culture. We want this office not to be siloed. We want this office to be, at the same time, to be autonomous. We want this office to be driver of our European product on multiple angles. And that takes the challenge to keep the existing culture, to keep the existing momentum with the whole company, to introduce a new Amsterdam flavor to that office, to capture the value of the cultural perspective of people who either are local to Europe or who are traveling around the world and having a different perspective that is not exactly US, but that's more local and more favorable for Europe. And at the same time, the other challenge is how to get the office started from scratch, from a small number of team members, from rather a lot of tasks running around, figuring out the nitty-gritty deals of how the office is organized, and get it impactful, get it to own the product and the engineering infrastructure. So that all took a lot of work. When we started, we paid a lot of attention to the cultural fit, to the way we select the team members, and we did a great job. I think right now the team is really stepping up, is really picking up on the projects. We transfer projects one by one to Amsterdam. We take it on the ownership. We're making the progress. That is really great to see. I'm proud of the team, and I think this far we succeeded with building out the really strong culture here that would reflect on Plaid values, but certainly is having that Amsterdam flavor of Plaid. Yeah, so that's about the challenges. Thanks for asking.
Well, what about COVID? So you mentioned you started 5 days before, or you got to spend some time with Lou. You started right before the lockdown. How did that impact everything? I mean, how do you can't have people moving between place to place when we're all in a lockdown. How did you navigate that?
That was quite a story, not an easy one. I joined with the expectation to travel to San Francisco, live there for 2 months, get onboarded, get to know everyone, build a network. We had an opportunity to have dinner with Lou as he was in Amsterdam just before COVID broke down. And then 5 days later, everything was in lockdown. We were scared. We didn't know where to go, what to do. I think it wasn't easy. We had to adjust our plans to the reality. We maybe didn't go as fast as we really want to in the beginning, but what we did is we got the maximum out of the situation. I think we overall benefit by far that the entire company was forced to go online, to go in the work from home mode. Having the office started in a different time zone, in an online collaboration with the US folks, with the London folks, it helped having everyone forced to be online, because that situation became much more inclusive for the office, and we got as much as we could. I think now it will be much less complex to go back to working from the office, and I'm really hopeful for that to become a reality really soon. But that was the experience this far. I think the team, everyone who we got on the team in Amsterdam, and everyone who was on the US side, were really supportive, really kind to each other throughout this time, and really understanding that moving from the expectations to work at the office, to move to work remotely, work online, is changing how we operate, and it requires everyone to participate that.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Yaroslav. I'd love to hear from the kind of your vantage point, Lou. You lead our international engineering team. So you're based in San Francisco, although knowing you seem to be a nomad these days, but mostly based out of San Francisco. You have team members split all over the world. Like, how do you make it all work? What advice do you have maybe for others with globally distributed teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, and I do really want to recognize, as Yaroslav said, he joined literally 5 days before, you know, I flew back to the US and COVID kicked into high gear. And he's done an amazing job building a culture, despite the fact that the team has never really been able to hang out in person, hasn't been in the office, and that we've been dealing with all this stress from COVID and everything else. So nice job, Yaroslav. I think when you're back in the office, it's going to feel pretty easy by comparison. And I'm also really excited to have you and the team come over here, and I expect we'll have a lot more circulation between locations as things start to open up. You know, the challenge is, Yaroslav touched on a lot of this. The reality is Amsterdam and San Francisco have 0 hours of working overlap during the day, right? 9 a.m. in San Francisco is 6 p.m. in Amsterdam, with the exception of a couple daylight savings windows, like for like a week at a time. So we've had to do a lot to accommodate that on both sides. And, you know, the teams have been amazing. People have been willing to get up early on the West Coast, and in Amsterdam, you know, stayed late on occasion. And I think both sides recognize that we're trying to make this work. Ultimately, I think the way that we solve this is by giving Amsterdam as much autonomy as possible, so that they can own their own product areas, own their own planning, have their own meetings for sprint planning and daily stand-ups and all this stuff, and get to a point where we do stay in close contact, but we don't have as much synchronous dependency on each other. And I think when we get there, ultimately Amsterdam is where product and engineering is driven for Europe. San Francisco provides some support, and we do have some engineers in San Francisco supporting our European expansion. But as Amsterdam becomes more and more the locus of that energy, I think it will be much easier to deal with those time zones. And when we need to have deep mind melds, we'll just get people in the same room, as opposed to trying to do it all over Zoom. Not that I don't love Zoom, but I'm, you know, kind of ready to be over it. So
Sounds like there might be some fun trips in the future once travel can happen again. Some good
definitely.
dinners.
Yes.
All right. Well, the last question from me before we turn it over to Q&A, I'd love to hear from both of you. What advice do you have for other teams that, you know, might be looking to expand internationally? Maybe Lou, you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think don't try to do it right at the start of a global pandemic. That's my first piece of advice, but that hopefully will be relatively easy in the coming years. Second, I would say is, you know, in the early days of building out a team, find people who are going to have a really, you know, open mindset, right? Who are willing to adapt as the situation adapts, and who, when they see something they don't like or isn't working, they want to fix it, as opposed to, commenting on it and hoping somebody else takes care of it for them. And what I love about the team in Amsterdam is it's such a set of personalities of people who say, like, I want to make this better. I want to shape our destiny. And that makes such a difference in creating a strong culture and dealing with some of the rough edges of being a sort of pioneering team in a new office in a new country, and dealing with all the challenges that come with that. Yaroslav.
I can only echo what Lou said. When one just prepares to launch a new team, it's best to have some of a lead time. Don't try to, if you plan to open up a new office, don't try to make it the last minute. Have a lead time of a quarter, half a year, ideally, before you expect to actually have the impactful team on the ground. And second, that's like from a team formation perspective, hire for the local experience, but the folks would have the open mind towards impact, towards the mission of the company, towards the culture of the company, who indeed are ready to join and participate and be the founders, participate and make an impact not only on the company, not only code, but also on the culture of the new office. And then you will be successful, because it does take effort from the entire team to build out the great office. And like, so far, I'm very happy with where we landed.
And it's really just been incredible to see the spirit of co-foundership amongst the entire team in Amsterdam, and watching y'all kind of build this together. It's been such a privilege from me based in San Francisco, getting to work with y'all and also just see all the impact the team's having. It's really been awesome to watch. Thank you, Yaroslav and Lou, for answering my questions. I think we're tracking pretty close to time. And so we have a few minutes now for Q&A. For folks on the call, if you have a live question, just raise your hand in the Zoom kind of modal at the bottom. There's a raise hand button, and then we'll unmute you so you can ask the call live. Oh, and I see we have some questions in the Q&A box too, so we'll start there. But again, feel free to raise your hand if you want to shout it out live. First question: what are the biggest technical challenges you want to tackle over the next year? Maybe Yaroslav, you can take this one first, and Lou, you can add if you have anything.
I think I can take this one. So next year will be a year, well, it will be another year of growth. We had an amazing year where we went from 7x to 10x on multiple dimensions, from the traffic we receive, from the number of transactions we process, from the number of people we have at the office. Pretty much everything went really high. I'm down to the point that I feel a little guilty on how much we actually benefit from the global pandemic, because fintech is booming, everything is moving online. Something that will happen next year is that we'll grow again, and we'll grow again 10x. We'll maybe grow again more than 10x. I actually expect more than that. And that will bring its challenge in a couple of ways. We'll move from the phase where our biggest investment is reliability, and we'll need to transcend that and invest much more in the user experience, in the observability of the system. That takes an effort, because the systems we're building here, they are more unique towards Europe, and they are owned by the Amsterdam office. And that will be one of the direction on how to fine-tune the system, how to have a really strong hand on everything that is happening and having everything transparent. The other part of this is how to make sure that under the growth that we projected, the system wouldn't crumble. The system would be reliable and 100% available to our customers, hitting those 4, 5, 6 nines eventually. And the engineers know what I'm talking about. That will be an interesting challenge as well. I think those two are presented on a technical lane. There will be a lot of organizational challenges, and the addressing how we change the way we approach the product building. But I guess like if I'm very happy to talk about the product part too in this call. Meantime, I also want to make sure that we can answer other questions. Do we have any?
Actually, let me jump in. Yaroslav, that's a great answer. The other thing that I think is really interesting that's unique to what we're doing in Europe is shifting the mindset of Plaid from one where, all of Plaid's products in the US are about read-only extraction of data and making it available to our customers, right? In Europe, we're suddenly writing data to the banks. We're moving money. and building that muscle and having a team that gets really good at the critical reliability and safety needed to move money in very high volume all over Europe is something that I think, I'm excited to see this team get good at, so that we can train the rest of Plaid, so that Plaid can build new products in the US that are similar and get into the sort of flow of money, which is a much scarier and obviously more interesting technically space than in simply reading data.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jaroslav. Next question. What is the effect of GDPR on Plaid products and services? Is the Amsterdam team responsible for transforming the US products to fit the regulatory needs of the EU? Lou, Yaroslav, you want to take this?
I can take this, yes. I want to address the later part of the question first. I think the goal of Amsterdam team is much less to transform the US product and much more to build the European product. And that is a big difference for me. We want to provide a global uniform API for every customer of Plaid to make sure that they only need to integrate once with Plaid and use product globally. But at the same time, there are huge differences in the underlying implementations, in the underlying functionality of the banks, how data processing works, how payments are being initiated. And so Amsterdam team is developing product, and multiple things that we build here are greenfield development. Now, getting back to the actual bigger question on how we've been affected by GDPR, Plaid, even before expanding to Europe, was already implementing a lot of data controls that would be available to the users in the US, because Plaid is actually much ahead of what the minimal regulatory requirements are for the users. We care not only about meeting the regulations, but also pushing it further and creating a really great experience in multiple ways. So multiple items, multiple requirements of GDPR were addressed ahead of time. And once we moved here, once we expanded to Europe, we only needed to implement the light patches and add a bunch of lambdas that would implement the GDPR cleanup. And that is it. Currently, practically, the very practical implementation that was done in San Francisco is still owned there, but I believe it will move to be owned in Amsterdam quite soon.
Thanks, Jaroslav. We have another great question in the Q&A box. Remember, you're welcome to raise your hand and unmute if you want to ask live. The next question: how can one join as a developer at Plaid? Do you need to be a local candidate where the Plaid office is?
Cool. I appreciate this question because it sounds like a plant, but I think this actually came from a guest. So thank you for teeing up such a great question. So the reality is, right now we want everybody to be in Amsterdam as part of the international European team. I think it's really valuable in these early days, once we get back into the office, to have a team that's all sitting in one room, able to talk to each other, solve problems together, and that kind of thing. But the reality is the winds of change are blowing in tech, and it would not surprise me if down the road we introduce the concept of a distributed team for Europe that sits alongside the Amsterdam team or as part of it, but where people are able to live, in various parts of Europe. I could certainly see it happening. Other areas of the world, who knows? Plaid is certainly not going to stop its international expansion with Europe, although it is our focus for now. But the good news is, if you live somewhere else in the world and you're interested in working with us, it's really easy to move to Amsterdam. In general, the visa situation is pretty straightforward. And then, you can get a nice bicycle and cruise around the canals and have a very nice life. As I've seen Yaroslav demonstrating every time I talk to him about his personal life, I'm just like, why am I not living in Amsterdam? So anyway, if you're interested, we do have some openings right now. We're going to continue to hire pretty aggressively over the next year and beyond. So you should definitely reach out. Yaroslav and I are both happy to chat with you and learn more about where you're coming from and what you're interested in.
Totally agree. I just want to reinforce that with the way we hire, we support the international relocation. And if you want to join our team, you don't have to be in Amsterdam or the Netherlands specifically. In fact, half of our team been relocated this far, even under the not easy situation of COVID. So you're welcome to both use the official way of applying, and we have a really nice portal where you can just hit up us with your resume, and we'll follow up on this. Or alternatively, you can hit either me or Lou on LinkedIn with a request, and we'll be happy to have a chat too. In fact, while we were having a chat, someone hit me up on LinkedIn, not even from this group, with inquiry if they would be if it would be a good thing to have a chat. So you're welcome to do the same.
Thanks both. I want to remind folks we're nearing the end, but we do have time for maybe a last question if anyone wants to unmute or put another question in the Q&A box. I'll give a second to see if that happens. All right, I actually have one last question before we go. I'd love to hear more about some of the customers we're working with, if we can talk about that. Maybe Yaroslav, can you give some more insight into who we're partnering with and some of the products we're supporting in Amsterdam and in Europe?
I think I'm not sure I got that question right. Could you repeat, please?
Yeah, who are some of our biggest customers? Who are we working with?
Right. In practice, one of the customers, we have a couple of really big customers. One of them is Curve. In fact, I have the card somewhere here on the shelf. It's a really nice, neat app that allows people to manage their finance better. We also have one of the big customer that is really pushing our limits sometimes, and those folks are really beauty to work with, is Paysend. It's the app that allows people to move money around the world and really helping to navigate the finances in a really easy way. And those folks really push the boundaries for us. We're looking for many more customers. For many of them, I cannot talk about just yet because we didn't have the public launch. But overall, looking at the roadmap that is happening and overlooking at the estimation of the traffic that we have based on the customers that we in talks with, I am very much excited, but at the same time, a little bit scared about how much of work and how much of scale we're going to be facing soon.
Sounds like we need to hire to help manage through all this growth. Well, thank you, Yaroslav. Thank you, Lou. Thank you to everyone who dialed in to join this call, and then for future people who are watching this on YouTube. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Just to reiterate what Lou and Yaroslav said earlier, we're hiring, we're growing. If you're interested in learning more about working at Plaid, working in our Amsterdam office, find one of the two of them on the internet, LinkedIn. We'll be for sure happy to chat more. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, day, whatever you have ahead of you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you much, all. Good day.
Thanks so much for coming in. Bye.